Connor.
Oh.
We've got a quorum with what we have here. So I'm going to call I guess it's October 26 Sandusky City Planning Commission to order and ask that staff or the administrative assistant call the roll, please.
Jade Castile. Jim Jackson.
Here.
Pete McGorry.
Here.
David Miller.
Here.
Steve Pajali.
Here.
Connor Whalen. Mike Zolhoff.
Here.
Great. Okay, I guess we can proceed. It would appear we have a quorum. I'm not sure where the remaining members are, but I guess we'll proceed. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the July 27th Planning Commission meeting. I can't remember why we didn't approve those earlier.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Zoll.
They weren't available apparently.
Okay.
I'm going to make the motion that we table that. And the reason, well,
Second, just so we can have discussion.
yeah, okay, so the reason I'm doing that is because there must be some mistake. I had a lot of comments on Venice LLC 3712, and I see my name's zero. Ms. Castile had, I think, a meaningful comment. There's nothing there. This is not a trivial omission. I had substantial objections and points to make anyway. Whether they were objections or not, I don't understand why none of that's there. Am I confusing this with the wrong meeting or something?
If I may, through the chair, we were directed to reduce the amount of text that was going in the meeting minutes because our administrative assistant was taking multiple, like a whole day and a half to be able to almost transcribe the minutes. Over the years, we were looking back and the Planning Commission meeting minutes had continued to grow. And we're really directed to note that staff presented the staff report, which is in the public record, and if there were comments brought up by the applicant or things, and just mostly documenting what the motion was and who voted on the motion, and that's the primary goal of the minutes. And we do have the recordings to memorialize the entire conversation.
Are those kept in the permanent record?
So that's a question that I can look into.
They are not.
They're not in the permanent
Yeah,
record.
if this becomes a permanent record, then.
So if I may.
Oh, sure.
Commissioner, meeting minutes are not supposed to be a transcript. We're actually kind of an aberration in how detailed our meeting minutes are.
Sure.
So I think that we're trying to find a balance between staff time, preparing the meeting minutes, and accurately reflecting the conversation. I would recommend if you have, like, if there are areas where something wasn't specifically noted that it might not be accurate about the conversation, that's what the motion's for, to amend, and we can amend those minutes. And
Yeah, and I would, and that's what I'm getting at is that I'm not looking for a transcript. I'm not looking for, in fact, it's mercifully, we say things that aren't recorded because sometimes they're gaffes and sometimes they make no sense and sometimes they don't. But I think there were some, in fact, what we were advised of in the past is that we needed to include reasons for our decisions. That we wanted that in the record, especially if it could become contentious later. So I just wonder why, and it has been the prior practice, so it just seems strange that this was one where I think I brought out some good points, and I really would rather, without arguing that we did everything else right, we voted, I'm okay with that. I was the sole no vote, but I would like the record to show, at least capture my points so that it doesn't look like I'm just saying no without giving a reason. Because I thought they were important points. I pointed out, I discussed the unit size discussion. I pointed out that there's clearly not enough parking there. I did discuss I disputed the less traffic contention from the staff. Just a matter of opinion, of course, but that the idea that a hotel would generate more traffic than residential use that could include multiple cars per unit. And there were a couple of other things. And again, I don't want to be persnickety about capturing every word, but I don't think it's unreasonable to insist that the points I made that justify my no vote be captured.
Sure, and I mean, I would recommend a motion to that effect, and we can amend those minutes as directed.
That would be my suggestion, if you could just provide a summary.
I think you, if I may, Commissioner,
Yeah.
I believe is this the kind of bullet points you just gave just now are what
Yeah.
you'd like the minutes to reflect. And since we do have that recorded, we can incorporate those from the recording. And if you would like to just make a motion.
I think one of the most important things was that I kind of questioned the claim that it was a lawful non-conforming use.
Sure.
In part because if we would have said, you're right, we're not really sure, okay, fine. So we kind of, I think we kind of got there that, well, for good reasons, you know. I mean, anyway, thank you. I'm not going to worry about the exact wording. If you want me to write it for you, well, but I don't think I should. I could.
I think
Mr. Zuloff, would you be willing to amend your motion to include your comments or work with the planning staff to include your comments? And
Right.
maybe we can
And
bring these minutes back and approve them at that time.
Right. So
Or approve them with the.
that was my
with the
motion. That was my reason for the motion to table.
Okay.
And therefore, I think the changes are substantive enough that I'd like to see them first before we approve them. So I'm fine with, just wait until next month. I know it's been since July, but.
So we've got a motion to table and
To
a
table in
second.
a second, yeah.
I guess, we need to call the roll, I guess, on that.
Okay. Steve Pajali,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff. Sorry.
Yeah. Zulhar, anything close? Mike? Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the next item of business, which is the approval of minutes from the September 28th, 2022 Sandusky City Planning Commission meeting, at which I did not attend because I was out of state.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion they be approved as distributed.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that set of minutes? Hearing none, do we need to call the roll, I guess? Approval of those minutes?
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
I'm going to vote yes, even though I wasn't there. I have read the minutes, and it appears that it covers the topics from that agenda. So I'm going to vote yes to approve those minutes.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes.
Steve Pajali,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Okay, those minutes have been approved. The next item on our current agenda is a public hearing. Bruce T. Homer has submitted an application for a right-of-way vacation request for a part of Fremont Avenue located contiguous to 107 Fremont Avenue and 108 Fremont Avenue. And the adjacent property parcel numbers are listed in our agenda. I won't take the time to read those. This is a public hearing, and I'm believing that people are here to speak on this application, and anybody that chooses to speak needs to be sworn in. Is that correct? Or
Since this
do we
is-
have the staff staff present it first.
I would swear them all in now.
Yeah.
It's not an adjudication hearing, though, so I don't think they need to be sworn in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's just a public hearing.
Okay.
So we did have it.
They're just going to make comments.
They'll just make comments, but generally we do the staff
Okay.
presentation and commissioner comments first, and then
Okay.
invite members of
All
the
right.
public to come up.
Quick question.
Those are just comments then, they're not sworn.
Correct.
Okay.
Does this not require a public hearing at the city commission level then?
The right-of-way vacation does move on to have city commission approval. Would it need a right-of-way?
I was,
Mr. Oaks, I think,
I'm
can
quite-
confirm.
we have had public hearings. I'm not sure we're required to, but I'm pretty sure that there has to be a public hearing. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that,
I believe so, but off the top of my head, I don't have it right in front of me.
yeah, thank you.
They're very different, whether it's petitioned or not petitioned, so I don't have them as memorized as other public required hearing
By
schedules.
petition, do you mean?
If the petition is signed by all the affected property owners for vacations, there's a different process than if someone requests a vacation.
Thank you.
And it's not agreed upon by anybody in an adjoining property.
To the chair, if I may, the applicant owns all the adjacent parcels in this request, so therefore he signed off for himself, so he did not require public notice.
At this body?
Correct.
So,
How about city commission?
It would, yes.
Thank
I
you.
believe so.
That's what I thought.
so in essence, and my ears are a little plugged up from, I think, from allergies or whatever, but, so in essence, all adjoining property owners have approved this petition.
Correct, because the applicant
Right.
is the surrounding property owner.
So do you want to go ahead and
Yeah.
make your
Sure, thank you.
presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The surrounding zoning of this this public right-of-way is surrounded by RB, roadside business. The proposed vacation is approximately 11,500 square feet of land. It's currently undeveloped with no imminent city plans of a street extension of Fremont Avenue. The applicant has verbally stated to staff he wishes to vacate the property because he owns all the surrounding property, and he'd like to run utilities across this public right-of-way to the other side where he plans on building a new structure. Vacating the right-of-way would ease this process according to the applicant. City staff evaluated a number of topics from the Bicentennial Vision and Comprehensive Plan. Three of the topics that staff had focused on are as followed, and that is, one, waterfront access in parks. Direct quote from this part of the comprehensive plan is, the city feels both physically and in opinion that it lacks access to waterfront. In a few locations, public access has been preserved, but overall the waterfront remains set back from the public right-of-way, visually blocked by the private development or one of the many private marinas. As a result, these conditions, it is important that the city maintain existing public access while working to create new access point and redevelopment projects. Focus area and corridors was bullet point 2, and that is the intersection of Fremont Ave and Venice Road is considered a gateway to the city in the western corridor. Bullet point number 3 is that neighborhood spotlights the west neighborhoods here. Direct quote from our comprehensive plan, uniting all the western neighborhoods and improving connections to the other neighborhoods and amenities is a top priority. Venice Road, the main east-west corridor, serves as the primary opportunity to create multimodal infrastructure for bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. Fremont Ave right-of-way is largely intact to the waterfront edge of the city north of Venice Road. Despite this area of land being separated from the Sandusky Bay by the railroad tracks, any future development opportunities in this area would emphasize the importance of public access to the water, including views and site orientation. Public right-of-way is valuable for development, redevelopment, and public access to sites in the city. Reacquiring public right-of-way once vacated can be very time and cost prohibitive. Considering these points, all in alignment with the stated goals of our comprehensive plan, staff has determined that maintaining the public right-of-way is of best interest to the public in this case. In conclusion, staff recommends the denial of the proposed public right-of-way vacation to the extension of Fremont Ave located between 107 and 108 Fremont Ave. And I will call it the parcels. The parcels are 60-00573.001, 60-00277.000, 60-00281.000. Upon passing of this request, staff would recommend any new parcels from this vacation request be zoned RB roadside business. Thank you.
Any questions of staff?
Yeah, if the property is not vacated, how would we propose Mr. Homer deal with his utility thing? Is there another way to skin that cat?
To the chair, if I may, to Mr. Miller. That'd probably be a question directed towards the city engineer. City planning staff has no direct affiliation with the process of right-of-way, especially with utilities other than the vacation process. But staff can assume or would probably assume that there is a process that he can put utilities under this public right-of-way with city engineer approval after review.
If I may, it sounds like you would need some sort of access across the property if it wasn't vacated. So he'd probably be coming to the city for an easement or sale or something. So at the very least, he would need an easement in order to have access to whatever utilities he would want to run under the line, and the city would have to approve that, and city commission would have to approve that. If it becomes his property, it is far easier for the applicant, just from a technical standpoint.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my impression is that historically, the property closest to those marina slips have been used for access by commercial fishing vehicles and the like. I wonder if anyone is aware of that, or if that's a concern that this would, I understand Mr. Homer owns it now, but does that preclude that historic access of that property to the marina?
In this case, the property's separated from Sandusky Bay from the railroad tracks, so I'm not sure there's any.
I understand, but that, you see the boat docks in the picture, and I remember seeing fishing apparatus there, and I believe they used to haul fishing catches out in that slip. I don't know how it gets under the railroad track. I don't know if that's the water going out from Margaritaville down there, if that's where Cold Creek ends up coming out there.
I believe the east, property to the east is, it's like trout camp or something. That's not the same owner as the applicant. Alec, did you get any expressions of concern?
I've gotten no feedback from
I know, but.
positive or negative.
I just want to let somebody, my recollection, I've been up that creek with a small boat in years past. and
Did you have a paddle?
No, I think I had 2 paddles. But in any event, I think you're correct. It was fishing net storage, and earlier, I think they used to have live trout pen, or carp pens,
Yeah.
and they would ship it to New York for gefilte fish. So that goes back many, many years. I don't know that that's ever going to happen again, and I understand what you're saying. Under the railroad bridge, you can't get much of a boat, so I think they were almost like fishing barges that would come in, and then the live, because that was a religious requirement, I believe, they had to be shipped live in tanks. So now, will you ever see that again? Probably not, but I'm sure it was a previous owner and a previous operation. My question would be the same as yours. Is there another reasonable alternative to get utilities under there? And I don't know if this is time critical, if that we could find that out.
Mr.
Since
Chairman, I'd have the same question. I mean, are we killing a gnat with a steamroller here if we need to, I don't see why you need to vacate an entire street to, it's not just right away. I mean, it is a street. I mean, there's no
there's no road there, but.
You know, and maybe it's justified to restrict the traffic down that road. Maybe, right now, it's, the owner owns all the property. Why would people drive down there? And then, at all hours, people might, drive down there for no reason. And yet, I'm in complete agreement that we do not give up our access to the water. And I'm surprised the waterfront watchdogs aren't here. Maybe they didn't catch it, but I think the concerns are completely valid, and I think we can find other ways, maybe just even administratively, to address the true needs of, without, and still respect our access to the water
Mr. Chairman?
for the future.
Oh, I didn't mean to
Mr. Pajala.
jump in. I went out and took a look at that piece of property, and his residence is kind of tucked away. You have to go back in to take a look at his. The parking area to the east of his residence, that he owns that, right? Or the owner has that? It's kind of like a lot there that has the fencing around it.
It appears that part of that could be within the public right-of-way currently.
Okay. And does he, would he be allowed to build that pole barn, given his request?
To my knowledge, he hasn't submitted a site plan on the pole barn on the west parcel.
Yeah.
That would be a zoning question, whether he could
Okay.
do that as a primary structure on the west parcel if it remained its own parcel. He does have a small contiguous piece across the top, which gives him some leeway
area.
to combine them if he wanted to do that.
I think it's
And-
fairly
and your-
obvious that
And
there-
your recommendation is to deny, right?
Correct.
His request?
Out of the interest of the future redevelopment potential of the parcel and keeping as often as we can, the public access we have to the water as close as possible
Yeah.
is in the better interest of the public at this time. I did speak with the applicant and let him know, if you ever wanted to parcel this off for a couple housing sites, you would need that public roadway for people to be able to access them. So there's value for you if that stays public right away as well. And he understood, he's like, well, that's not my plans, but I understand what you're saying. He would be able to get utilities on the west parcel with its own meter. Like Mr. Heil mentioned, he could approach the city for an easement if there's a utility access that he wanted to pursue with the Public Works Department. So there are definitely other options.
Yeah, I don't see why this is that difficult. Why don't we just, I would be willing to take your recommendation, and maybe you can work with engineering to get him an easement and solve the problem. It appears all he's doing now is parking his truck there anyhow, so. Unless he pulls the rule of adverse possession out of his hat, Pete.
Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
Yeah, for me to get a better understanding of what's going on here, are you saying that there's utilities on the east side of the street but none on the west side of the street? Is that what my understanding is?
Mr. Oaks, do you mind reiterating what you heard from site?
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Jackson. The applicant was not super clear on where the utilities were, and I don't recall that being in the plat. Based on verbal conversations, I was under the presumption that the house to the west, he also owns. So he owns two structures on this proposal, and he was trying to cut across the street to the northeast corner in this picture on the screen here to put what he had mentioned to be a pole barn, but obviously without a site plan, I don't want to say he's going to build a pole barn without factual evidence of that, but that's what he had verbally said.
Well,
to
the
myself.
properties that individuals are living in, they have utilities, right, in the general area?
I would assume so, yeah.
Okay.
And that's on the west side, though, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I
Yeah,
think it might have been
generally
misstated.
west.
Yeah, on the west side, yeah.
I have one other question, if anybody knows. The railroad right-of-way, does anybody know if that's an easement? They own the land that the railroad is on? I'm just curious.
I'm glad you brought that up. I had the same question. It was obviously was a railroad there. Is that an abandoned track or?
No,
That's
No, that's
main
main
theirs.
line.
West line.
Yeah,
Main line.
that's active.
That's theirs. So
My recollection is that the railroad owns that parcel.
Okay, so I was hearing, and it's the part in red they want to vacate, I was hearing that the applicant owns both sides,
So if
but not, except for the parcel that's clearly,
Yeah.
could you highlight for me then what the railroad, I'm confused on who owns what here?
So the
Railroad's
applicant
right along the
owns,
bay.
can you see my mouse on your screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Applicant owns this
Yes?
and this.
Okay,
And if I may
what
add-
does the railroad still own?
The railroad owns where the track.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that curved line obviously was a siding or a,
This
yes.
is
That-
owned by
the applicant owns that,
as
yep.
well.
I'm sorry?
This piece is owned by the applicant as
Yeah,
well.
owned in fee, of course. I imagine then, or maybe you don't know, if that was an abandoned railroad track. Not that it's particularly relevant unless there was some dispute, claim to the title or something. Normally, when a railroad vacates, abandons a track, the city has offered it. I could have sworn that the property to the east or southeast along the water at one point belonged, or at least some of this belonged to the city of Sandusky when they first moved here. I couldn't find any record of that, but I was so sure I was right about that, and I couldn't find it, and I was told by city staff that we owned some property down there, and now I see that it's not, so I was curious as to what the record was on that. Kind of an aside, but not totally irrelevant, and kind of a moot point or irrelevant if we vote no. Anyway, but.
Any further comments or discussion? Anybody prepared to make a motion?
Through the chair, if I may, I believe that you should ask the public before a motion, right? It's because it's public hearing?
Okay,
I would, give.
yeah, all right, is anybody here that wants to speak on this issue? Apparently, nobody. All right, is anybody in the commission prepared to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, before we do, though, I'd be willing to make a motion. On that picture that you, Ms. Blair, were just pointing around with your mouse, just to the left, I think generally west of where it says Fremont, it looks like a rooftop. Is that not where the applicant lives? And then just generally south of that toward the bigger road, I think there's another house on that parcel, a small house that he also owns. I'm thinking that he owns a number of those other lots too that are not combined.
I know there are multiple lots he owns. I don't know which home he lives in.
107 would be to the west, 108 is closer to the water, the one that's tucked away that you have to drive back in to see. I just assume that might be his residence, I don't know. But the truck is parked closer to 107, so maybe it's 107.
Mr. Chairman, per your request, I'd make a motion to deny the application per the staff recommendation.
Okay.
You
is
made
there-
that motion, I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for discussion. I have a further question, now that I look closely. Where the mouse was being moved around, this large parcel that runs along, I'll call it the canal, or the Cold Creek, opposite the boat docks, it looks like there are structures on there. Is that one parcel, one lot, or is that a number of parcels or a number of lots?
Well, all the tax lots are delineated there by the, you just moved away from the,
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If you look at the plat, it showed historically there had been several parcels on this now larger parcel, which may explain the number of structures on it. Staff is unaware if these structures are still intact or usable, but that is staff's recollection of maybe why it's set up the way it is.
those little hashes between the dotted lines are lot combinations. So at some point, those were separate and they were,
Well, my point is if they're combined now, then, and if there's a structure already on that side, I would think you could get utilities, or utilities are already there. So, but anyway.
Yeah, good point.
So we've got
good point.
a motion and a second to approve the
No.
recommendation for denial.
No.
To approve
Oh.
the recommendation to
To
deny.
deny the record.
The motion was to deny the application per the staff recommendation.
Okay, any further discussion? Maybe call the roll, if you will, please.
David Miller,
Yes, to deny the recommendation.
Jim Jackson,
Yes to deny.
Steve Pajali,
Yes to deny.
Mike Zuloff,
Yes to deny.
Pete McGorry.
Yes to deny.
Mr. Chairman, just an aside, and maybe, I suppose it could wait till the end of the meeting, but is it just me or has the echo gotten worse in here? I mean, I
think it is, but I'm complaining about my ears to begin with. And
Well, I mean, if somebody speaks directly into the mic, that seems to work pretty well. And like getting away from the mic and with no amplification works. And if you're anywhere in between, there's this echo that is making it very difficult for anybody, even with normal hearing, much, and worse for someone who's mildly impaired in their hearing like I am.
I think you have two mics pointed towards you, which might be
Yeah.
adding to it today.
Does this make it any better?
That sounds different to me.
Well, see, the way this is, I think there's some latency in the system. I'm not sure it's the same for every mic, and that might be part of the, there's some issues here.
this does seem, I will agree with you, it seems worse today for me than in times past.
I never had problems at the old City Hall, even with no amplification. And here, with a pretty fancy system, I constantly have trouble understanding, and I'm not the only one, I'm sure.
We can bring that to the attention of the IT department and see if they have any remedies in the system.
Okay, so that application has been denied per this vote. And now we're on the next item, special presentation by City Manager Eric Woopser. You're not Eric Woopser.
No, I am not. That go? The first slide didn't pop up.
No, I am not Eric. I am Julie Moich.
Okay.
I am on Eric's team for Leadership Ohio, and he is here and will be, I'm sure, answering questions and jumping in, but I'm going to do the bulk of the presentation today. So my name is Julie Moich. I come to you from Westerville, Ohio, which is northeast of Columbus. I'm originally from Willoughby, which is northeast of Cleveland, and I am a historian and a professor at Denison University in Granville. Eric and I met through a program called Leadership Ohio. I'm used to, as a college professor, talking for about 80 minutes without really taking a breath, so I won't do that today. But if you have any questions or if I need to repeat myself, just let me know. So Leadership Ohio is a statewide organization, nonprofit organization, that brings leaders together to take them around the state and learn more about what are the challenges and opportunities that our communities are facing. This year, our program runs from April through November, and we have a cohort of about 40 leaders from across the state. Within that cohort of 40, we self-select a small group and design and choose how to move forward on what is called an impact project. And Eric and I are on the same small team, and so what you'll hear today is part of our impact project from that team. Our impact project team has 8 people on it, and within that team of 8, we are pursuing 3 initiatives. And I just want to take a moment to share with you our why of why we came together. It began with 8 people who wanted to focus on seniors in Ohio. Not high school seniors, not college seniors, but seniors over the age of 65. We all came with our own personal why, and I'll just take a moment to share with you my own and then talk more broadly about the group. As I said earlier, I was raised in Willoughby, which is a blue-collar community on the northeast side of Cleveland. I was raised with 8 grandparents and 4 great-grandparents and no cousins my own age. So my whole world was surrounded with people who told great stories and loved me unconditionally. One of these people, as I got older, was my mother-in-law, who, as she aged, I became very concerned with because she lived in a home by herself that was unsuitable for her physical needs. She passed away this past May, and it was within that home that she passed away. And so I really wanted to figure out ways that we could match appropriate housing with seniors. The other people in my group came for a variety of other reasons. Some people were concerned about water utility and water access for seniors. We know that in Ohio, especially in the major cities, seniors are losing their water utilities. Their water is being turned off because they can't pay the bills. And the water utility companies don't know that this is happening to seniors in order to help provide resources to turn the water back on. Other people came because of other personal interactions with seniors or work they were doing professionally, but we all came together and realized that seniors 65 and plus in Ohio are 39% of them are cost burdened in some way. And that is more than every other age category combined, meaning that seniors suffer from the most cost burden in our state. And that was something that we really wanted to address. So that's how we came to the topic. We decided to choose Sandusky because as we were sitting together thinking, well, where are we going to look into this more? We didn't want to do the 3 big cities. We didn't want to do Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati. We wanted to look in the cities that were known as legacy cities, the post-industrial cities that are smaller, between 15 and 65,000 people in population, that the Greater Ohio Policy Center has declared as reinvention cities. And Eric, who was in our team, said, well, Sandusky is one of those. Sandusky is one of the 16 noted reinvention legacy cities that have suffered from population loss and manufacturing decline. And 17% of Sandusky's population is over the age of 65. And of that 17%, 9% lives below the poverty rate. 52% of residents in Sandusky meet the hardship index qualification, which is that they live within crowded housing, that they have low access to quality education, they don't have income to live beyond the poverty rate, and their unemployment rates are higher. And 50% of Sandusky residents are homeowners. So thinking about the seniors who live here, specifically, 34% of seniors live alone. And we really wanted to think about what we could do to help seniors who are suffering either from poverty or hardship in another way, or who live alone, or who don't know how they will feel safe in their home, how we could specifically address that situation. So in all of our research, we talked to experts across the field, a lot of different local, state, and national organizations, and we came to this idea of accessory dwelling units, which is something that is being promoted all across the country in various local and state levels. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, have 6 basic structural options. As you can see on the screen, they can be either detached on the same property parcel, they can be attached, built attached, sort of like your normal in-law suite concept. An interior built upstairs where maybe the senior lives on the first floor and the rest of the family moves into either the upstairs or, as you see on the lower left, the downstairs level. Something can be built above in a garage, apartment style ADU, or also a garage could be converted into an ADU. And so we decided to bring this to you today as a strategy that is being used to increase housing for seniors, to increase housing options for seniors, and thinking about what kind of addition to your housing supply this could offer and what kind of financial incentives we could create together for homeowners to make this an option for families in your community. We are going to take this and share what we have learned and this blueprint that we have put together and offer it to the other 15 legacy cities so that they too can see how they might apply it. But we wanted to bring it to Sandusky first. The benefits of ADUs include allowing seniors to age in place. One of the stated goals of the AARP and the state and federal government is to create new systems and ways for seniors to age in their own homes. This includes financial incentives for modifications, for allowing seniors to maintain and modify their own homes in order to be able to maintain residence there, but also things like putting a pause on property tax increases after age 65 so that they can continue to afford to live on that parcel. So an ADU attached to another dwelling would allow them to offset some of these cost changes and would create more options for seniors who were concerned about the relationship between expenses and their static income or their sustained income. The second benefit of ADUs is neighborhood stability. I know in our first conversation with some of you, we talked a lot about neighborhood stability, and I think this is an important note to talk about how ADUs, and it has been proven all across this country, keep families from leaving due to changing housing needs. So as families' demographics change in age and shape and number of people, an ADU is a method to allow families to stay together and to stay in Sandusky. It also allows for more affordability in housing options, especially with rent costs increasing. We know that in Sandusky, and I have the number right here, especially in in Census Tract 413, 51% of seniors, this is 65 and over renters, are rent burdened. The gross median rent there is $789. Again, I'm talking about Census Tract 413. And 51% of seniors are feeling the burden of the increasing rents in a significant portion of your community. ADUs are also one of the many tools to address needs for seniors, those especially who are in set income and therefore hardship situations, who maybe are having to, especially this coming winter, make decisions between keeping their electricity on or accessing food. We have, this is for your local homeowners. We really want to stress that this will benefit the families in your community, and it will allow families to have the option to remain in your community. They don't have to leave in order to find other housing options, and they will be able to contain and keep multi-generational families together, which really puts the family first in the structure of the community. So this is something that we want to make sure that in the conversations we are emphasizing how this will benefit local homeowners, especially if we can get to a place where we can talk about the incentives and the financial structure about how this would work. We have many partners in advocating for this. I will be able to, in the next few days, forward you a support letter from AARP nationally and within Ohio. The American Planning Association, the Congress for New Urbanism, are also participating in advocacy across the country for AARPs. As well as your own in Sandusky here, an organization called Serving Our Seniors. We have one of their staff members with us today and will speak in public support for this. There are also other cities and states around the country who have already passed these ordinances or restructured their zoning code to allow for ADUs, and so that you're in good company. I will tell you, though, that there is not much happening around this in Ohio, and so when we're really leading the way here in Ohio, and I want to tell you that it's already becoming very well known. One of our group members was on a phone call with a leader from COHIO, which is the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, and she said to my team member, "Oh, I heard you guys are doing ADUs up in Sandusky. We're watching that." So it's already sort of spread, the word is out there that we're working on this, and people are excited. The state is watching. We have another team member who's been working with state leaders to think about how we might implement this statewide. And so that sort of local and state combination is also going to be interesting to keep an eye on. But this is something that we have been able to sort of jump on board with what's already existing and gain a lot of momentum and excitement to partner with us. What we want to accomplish in Sandusky is to ask for a review of the current zoning code. Our initial review of the zoning code suggested that we will need to make adjustments to 3 specific zoning barriers. The definition of accessory living accommodation would need to be revised. The definition of a single-family zoning parcel would need to be revised. And we would need to consider such barriers as potential setback and lot coverage barriers. So those 3 pieces of the code, we think, are the initial ones that will need to be addressed. But later and after that, we will also want to really think about how to incentivize construction, again, to benefit local homeowners. We'd like to ask the Planning Commission to vote for the planning staff, to pursue zoning analysis in order to figure out whether these code changes and or others will be necessary based on their analysis. And then they would bring those code changes requests to you, and then we would go through all of the other appropriate steps in order to make ADUs accessible for seniors in your community. The second step would be to create that incentive program and to conduct public outreach after the code change in order to communicate this to the public. So therefore, any family who doesn't know where their senior is going to be living next might be able to finally consider keeping them on property. We also know, and just give me a second to grab this number, that in Census Tract 410, almost 12% of seniors have moved within the county in the past year, and in other census tracts, nearly 10% of seniors have moved within the past year. That suggests that they're reacting to local rent burden, or they've decided no longer to own a home, and they're switching. Seniors are having to move in response. If we can create a public outreach program that teaches them why they don't need to anymore, that might work to help them age in place. And then finally, there would be an ongoing monitoring and reporting structure that would be put into place. I hope my echo wasn't too bad and that you heard all of that. I want to invite Sue from Serving Our Seniors to come up and speak for a few moments in support of ADUs, and then I will step up and take any questions. Okay? Sue, do you want to come up?
So, hello. We have noticed at our office that even 3 years ago, that housing was going to become a problem. And not that we had a crystal ball, but to the speaker's point, more older adults are choosing to go to apartments because they can't afford to keep up and maintain the homes that they own. And whether that's because they still have a mortgage, one of the spouse passes away. When one spouse dies, your mortgage doesn't go down. Your mortgage is the same, but your income has been cut maybe in half. So they're looking to sell because they can't maintain them. And I saw at your last meeting there was a program for home rehab. Well, there are more older adults on the list for home rehab and maintenance than the funding can provide. So and the scenario I'm familiar with ADUs, is it allows the older adult to keep their home, live in the ADU, rent out the full home, now supplement their income. So it's not that, and they also they're now making income where they can afford to maintain the home. So adding to the household income, especially after a spouse passes away, is very helpful. For some reason that I don't understand, Erie County's losing population, so we should have a surplus in housing, but it appears as though we don't. So rent has gone up, and we are getting calls daily looking for places to rent anywhere between $500 and below $800 a month. So as best as we can tell based on the inquiries we're getting, we are not able to find rental units that would rent at that rate. And if ADUs is going to be what increases the availability of housing when your supply increases, it will have an effect on lowering rent throughout the city. I do want to say that I am opposed to the concept of ADUs if the ADUs can be used for tourism, to charge, $1,500 a week. That certainly doesn't help create affordable housing for not just older people. You've got young people fresh out of college, they're looking for an affordable place to live too. And small housing could be appealing to the brain drain, the group that you're trying to bring back to Sandusky. So I think for a variety of reasons, I think the concept of ADUs and modifying ordinances could create a great deal of help for a variety of reasons, and not just for older adults, but for young adults as well. Thank you.
I got a question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I have a question. Eliminating some of these zoning restrictions, would that apply just to individuals that wanted to do an ADU, or would it just, if you eliminated those zoning restrictions, would they apply to everyone?
I will defer to Aaron to answer that question.
Depends what we do.
Yeah, it would depend on what we do. We'd have to be careful to craft the zoning changes to have the outcome that we were specifically looking for. But I believe that we could create ordinance changes that would target accessory dwelling units and make them legal in the city.
I have a question. Can you explain to me how an accessory dwelling unit, I realize if it's a separate standalone maybe, but how it's different than just an addition to a house, and if it's your family member, an extended family member already, do you need to have these changes just as long as you, now there's a setback issue, but if you just add on to your house, and then my second question is, how would this be different than just duplex housing and making it, if it's not an extended family member, could you just change it to two-family zoning from RD1? I'm not seeing the difference between just doing it that and this is just a new name for it. Now, I'm kind of in favor of this, don't get me wrong, and I just want to add one. I can picture like in a college town in some big old houses with maybe in the east side of Cleveland where old carriage houses with an upstairs, and I don't know if they're able to rent those out to college students right now without having it be ADU or whatever it is, or can you just do it?
My understanding is in most places, when zoning codes were adopted through the 70s, eliminated the ability to rent out carriage houses, even though historically it was very common to have your aunt or your cousin or your grandma living on site with you in their own separate apartment. That single-family zoning really took our nation by storm and made those types of living situations illegal. Currently in the city of Sandusky, the reason why that kind of high-level analysis pulled out the accessory living accommodation definition in our code is that we have a definition for accessory living accommodations, but you cannot put a full cooking kitchen equipment into it. So you cannot create an apartment on your property with an addition, like you said, and make it its own entrance and exit, its own unit legally in our zoning code right now, unless if you are in a two-family zoning district and you have a single-family home, you could convert that into a two-family structure. So we would have to, you're asking, just the tip of the iceberg of questions that we would start to ask with this is like, how does that definition change and what does that look like? Recently, I was in the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana American Planning Association conference in Kentucky, and the city of Louisville just went through a process to allow ADUs and promote them in their zoning code is for similar kind of an equitable housing access conversation and really making increased housing available to individuals. Because a lot of times you'll see when new housing is built, it's often single family or like a developer comes in and builds, 10 apartments or 100 apartments or something. But this is a strategy that allows individual homeowners to invest in their own property to create more housing in the city. It's just one tool in a toolbox that we can look at. They very carefully looked at single-family zoning redefinition and how that worked with duplexes, how it was different than a duplex. And so that's a source that I would definitely go to because Louisville has just done a ton of work. AARP is also.
You're getting a little beyond the question.
Well, I think I was answering some of the questions that Mr. McGorry was asking about how these definitions would work at, and like some of the understanding that I have of the topic so far.
Yeah, Mr. McGorry, to get to the first part of your question, to me, I think we're asking for clearly structures, freestanding structures that might include an apartment where you wouldn't otherwise. Right now, if you have a single-family house with a backyard, you can't build an apartment back there, and this might allow, if I understand correctly, such an ordinance, such a change might allow, given enough room and certain other criteria, even a freestanding structure, almost arguably a single-family unit behind the house.
Excuse me if I may, you can craft it, your group can craft it however
Of course.
you think works best for your city.
Right, but that would be one form, because I'm sure you chose the words carefully, but you seem to be suggesting that even if, well, by your definition, an accessory dwelling unit might be detached.
Correct.
Right? And then, so, and I like the way you're empirically, based on things that have happened in the past. I mean, a garage conversion, freestanding or attached, is almost a trope. Somebody living in the garage or somebody living above the garage or whatever, living above a detached garage, for example.
I'm going to say one thing. I definitely think this is worth pursuing for a lot of reasons. I think everybody has more questions than answers right now, and such as the overlap between what Sue had mentioned, not wanting this to be used for Airbnb type
Yes.
rentals. On the other hand, if you allow this ADU unit in an area that's already been approved for transient rental, you're going to have to somehow dovetail that all together, however you do that. But I think this is definitely, it's just exploring a new wave. So
Well, consistent with that, Mr. Chairman, I would then make the motion that this body direct the staff, consistent with the action plan as outlined here. Point number 1, ask the staff to pursue a zoning analysis. That would be the first step, and that would help clarify what the options are and what we're talking about. Was that not your first action plan?
Yes.
Bullet point was to direct the staff to pursue a zoning analysis?
Yes, that is what we are hoping for tonight, yes.
I think I got the words exactly right, didn't
Thank
I?
you.
You can go to that screen if you feel free.
No, I'm on it, I see it.
Well, we don't.
The screen for you.
We don't.
Yes.
Mr. Zuloff has taken over your presentation.
Well, no, that was a motion, and I got carried away with my motion.
Okay.
Second.
Mr. Pajali seconded. Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I just took a couple of concerns of mine, and I think, did you present the first time with, I think Mr. Zuloff and I had heard this earlier?
Yes, but I was on Zoom at that time.
Oh, yeah, you do a nice job, and certainly I appreciate the concept. My only thought is, and I think I expressed it the last time, was, are we just creating more rental housing? And I think you mentioned we have 50% home ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we're about at 50/50.
Right.
And we certainly don't want to fall behind or below 50% home ownership.
Right.
Because I think that's what keeps the community sound. But I'm willing to have the planning staff run this out, and I'm wondering if we could, when we first heard the presentation, we heard that it was going to be targeted towards seniors and family. And I'm wondering if there's some way that we could fashion this so that that's the way it remains. I don't know if that's possible. I imagine you would have to have strong code enforcement to follow up on these things and make sure they remain that way. And what happens down the road if the owner dies, and then you're left with a duplex or more rental housing? And those are just my concerns. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's an important point. And later on, another action plan point is incentive program. Well, we need incentives, but we also need safeguards.
Yes.
Right? So the devil's in the details. And so, of course, we're always worried about code enforcement and making sure that's always trouble. It's always a challenge.
Yes.
Constant challenge is making sure that you don't wind up with substandard housing that you're not making things worse, that you're making things better. And I think that will all be in the analysis. I hope that's considered in the analysis. I hope to live in a tiny house behind a big house and have somebody watch over me when I can't climb stairs anymore.
I had one other question on, you had mentioned, I think Sue had something she wanted to say. I saw her hand up, but you had said something about a property tax freeze for people over 65. Is that something you would approach the auditor's office on? I know they have a homesteading act that gives you a reduction, but.
Would that fall under incentive?
Pardon?
It would fall under incentive, yes. It is something that has been implemented in other places and we are hearing about. So again, I think what you'll find as the staff and you consider this, and we're happy to come back and continue the discussion at any point, there's a menu of options. Like you said, to put structure around it, to put safeguards around it, to make it so that it creates a benefit for your community and helps to add to home ownership or helps to release or reduce rent burden. Yes, of course. There is a menu of options. These things are on that menu. Perhaps something can be done about property taxes. Perhaps something can be done about owner-occupied requirements or prevention of absentee landlordship, right? Like all of these things can be on that menu that we can consider. One of the other things that I've heard that is required in other cities that's preventing ADUs that I'll just want to bring to your attention, some communities require that if you put an addition onto a home that has a kitchen, that the code, the housing code is brought up, other utilities are brought up to code on the main unit that addition is being put on. Does that make sense? And so it's creating expense for the main house, and it's de-incentivizing people from putting on that addition.
Yeah, that's right. That's a huge barrier.
Right. So these are all in that menu of barriers and opportunities that you can consider. But if we keep the goal in mind, which is increasing the housing supply so that seniors do not cost out of their housing, that should keep you on the right track.
I'd like to make just a further comment. There is a motion and a second already. I can foresee this whole process kind of turning into what happened in transient housing. Like, how do we ever come to an answer, and we just keep going round and round and round, and finally we just kind of walk away from it. Now, I still can envision the big mansion type house with my chauffeur living over the garages, and I don't see how that would be harmful to anybody.
In your dreams.
On the other hand, a lot of the housing around here, and we have such small lots, I just don't, I mean, and then my other question is, I can envision some elderly people who can't afford to stay in their own houses, and they can't figure out a way to do it, and maybe they don't have family to help them out, and how are they ever gonna see to the construction of an accessory dwelling unit and manage rental? You know, I still am in favor of exploring this. I think it's a good, I just wonder if it's not more of an academic undertaking than a practical reality, but more power to everybody. I think in these big old mansion houses, I think it's great. And I don't know how many of those we do have some of those around here, so.
I understand that. I think sometimes an iterative process that is not necessarily perfect out of the gate, but is some sort of progress, is worth pursuing.
No, I think it's worth pursuing.
And also, I would assume that the incentive package that you would design would allow for people to know about this in advance in a way in which they would be able to make the decisions they need to make as they are downsizing and approaching that 65 threshold before they are of age where they can no longer oversee something like this. I completely agree with you. But those are the things that if you have a well-developed program, it is not something that people will have to do at the last minute.
I'm wondering if, you said this is a demonstration project?
It is an impact project. I'm not sure what you mean by demonstration project.
Well, you said selected Sandusky as a demonstration project for these ADUs. I'm wondering if there is an area of the city where we could kind of use that as a demonstration project to do this, where there is a lot of elderly, and we could target some money to go towards ADUs just in that area, just to kind of see how it would work, and then build off of that if it seems to work pretty good. It's just something to think about. I don't know if it's possible, but.
I would suggest looking first at Census Tract 413, in which the owner-occupied hardship index is 15.5 points higher than other seniors.
I'm not sure where, I know this is 408, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Census Tract 413 is
at
is in the most southeastern part of the city.
Okay.
And if I can ever make something an academic exercise, I'm always happy to do so.
So why
I
don't,
didn't mean that with disrespect.
No, I understand,
Yeah.
but
why
it's
don't we
fun.
suspend the debate? And
Yeah. Any further comment before calling the question? I guess, Mr. Miller.
I hate to belabor it because I was ready to call the question a while ago. It seems like an obvious answer, but I haven't interjected for a while, and now's the time. I want to speak in support of exploring this because of my own experience of late. In the process of COVID, the living situation of my elderly parents became untenable, and the way that our family handled it was that a niece of mine built a cottage on her side yard, and they aged in place and both died there, and now she can't wait to have somebody buy that, haul it out, and put that cottage to its next life in somebody else's property. But it really worked for us and allowed them to stay within their income and become really part of a multi-generational household where their niece became a primary caregiver, and her children had constant interaction with great-grandpa and grandma, which was the joy of their lives in their most senior years.
I concur.
Tiny home, put it there
Yes.
where you need it, pull it out when you don't.
And to Sue's point, all the college students are excited about living in tiny homes.
Before they haul it away, you may want to ask them to hold it for you. We're all creeping up.
They're not going to hold it that long. It could be 30, 40 years.
That's what we all think.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, Sue.
Is the motion?
Go to the podium.
Is the motion to explore this contingent upon it being family?
The motion is to, for the staff, the motion was to direct the staff to pursue a zoning analysis.
Oh, okay.
That's the motion.
Okay, with nothing to do about
Yeah.
restricted to only family?
Iron
Only
out
be-
those details. There'll be a
Okay, that would
gazillion
be it.
iterations of this.
Thank you.
I've got a question for Sue. Do you see that it falls short if it's restricted only to family?
I do see it fall short if it is restricted to family, only because the individuals we're familiar with either have dysfunctional family, if they do have relatives, or their family is too far away to take advantage of something like this.
And you, I know in the past when we've talked, you also have had concerns about rental housing in the city and the influence of rental housing in the city. Do you think that that would be an issue as this property turns over? Are we creating more rental housing?
I am not opposed to rental housing if landlords fulfill their responsibility to keep the housing in good repair.
But that
and-
hasn't been
and
the,
appearance.
that hasn't been the practice over the years, right?
Well, and I guess that would be a matter of code enforcement,
Okay.
but, you know, I unfortunately, I'm a landlord. I'm fortunate to have a good tenant.
Yeah.
But by the same token, I take pride in that rental property. It's not much, but I know the people around me appreciate that we take pride in that rental property. And I don't see anything wrong with holding other landlords to the same standard.
Well, and I've always told you, that's got to be an easy unit to rent. It's located behind a bar, so.
That's right.
You ought to have a lot of takers.
Well, I've been fortunate, but, so thank you.
All right, thank you.
We prepared to call the question?
Can't call it.
Jim Jackson,
Yes.
Pete McGorry,
Yes.
David Miller,
Yes.
Steve Pajali,
Yes.
Mike Zuloff.
Yes.
Um,
So motion passes.
Motion passes, so we're going to explore it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would invite the staff, or maybe we should informally agree that I would be willing to have a special session or working session once the staff has been able to do some analysis so that we can have a work session separate from the normal agenda, either.
Could you have it done by next Monday?
Yeah, but well, whenever they're ready. I mean, it might take a month or two,
Yeah.
might be sooner than that, but I would welcome the opportunity to
I think
have
there's
a
gonna be
less formal discussion, more of a work session.
Okay, I think that's on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the presentation. Anything further on this topic? I guess I need to flip, I guess that's, we're at the end
You've
of,
come to adjournment.
yeah, anybody care to move to adjourn this
Did
meeting?
did the staff have any,
Rebuttal?
no, staff summary? I mean, from time to time, we're promised an update from the chief planner. Does the chief planner have anything to report?
I have not prepared any comments for this evening.
Okay.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Hey, Aaron.